Hello, and welcome to this tutorial about transform orientations in Blender. There are 6 transform orientations in Blender. You can find them here by clicking on the box here where it says Global, and you'll see the 6 transform orientations displayed. As you work with Blender though, you will find yourself mostly using the global and local orientations. In this tutorial, I will show you why you will sometimes find it more useful to work with the local rather than the global orientation. The global orientation relates to the 3 axes we are familiar with in Blender: the X, the Y, and the Z axis. They are colored red, green, and blue respectively to distinguish them. The Z axis is usually hidden by default, but you can display it by clicking on the overlays arrow here and then clicking on the Z axis. And now you can see the Z axis displayed along with the X and the Y axis. Each axis sporting their respective colors of red for the X axis, green for the Y axis, and blue for the Z axis. We are of course used to performing actions on each axis. For example, to move our figure on the Y axis, we will press G and then Y to constrain the movement to the Y axis, and then just move it back and forth on the Y axis. Simple enough. But what if we want to move the model in a path that does not coincide with any of the axes, and we want it to face the direction it is traveling in while it is moving? For example, if we were to rotate the model on the Z axis, say by 45 degrees, arrow Z, 45, and we needed to move it forward while facing the direction it was traveling in, that would be impossible, because with this orientation, it is not directly facing either of the X or the Y axis. If we try to move it on the X axis, for instance, it would appear to be moving rather sideways. GX. See, it's moving along the X axis, but it's moving in an unnatural way. It's not facing the direction it is traveling in. Same goes for the Y axis. If we try to move it along the Y axis, GY, it also moves in the same unnatural way. It's moving along the Y axis, all right, but it's not facing the direction it is traveling in. This is where the local transform orientation comes in. I'll create 3 cylinders, each of them representing an axis, and I'll give them the same colors as the colors for the global axis. With the visual representation of all 3 axes created, let us now perform the exercise we performed earlier, where we try to make the model look in the direction in which it was walking. The axis is now parented to the model and will move with it. Let me rotate it on the Z axis again, press arrow Z, and we'll just rotate it randomly this time. Let's just give it a random number like 57. So rotate it by 57 degrees on the Z axis. And of course, you can see that the local axis no longer coincide with the global axis. Let's move the model forward and make it face the direction it is traveling in. For this, we'll click on the Transform Orientations box and select Local. Press G to move, then Y. And you can see that we can move the model on its local axis. We can move it in a direction that does not coincide with the Y-axis while the model is facing the direction it is traveling in. I'll show you another way that local transform orientations can be very useful, and you'll probably find this more interesting. Indeed, anybody who is a fan of gymnastics or has an appreciation for the skill and dedication required to perform gymnastics should find it interesting as well. Now let's bring up the timeline. We'll need to fold the arms over the body and bend the legs at the knees like gymnasts often do when they are performing somersaults in real life. So select the armature, switch to pose mode, press A to select the entire armature, make sure you are in frame 1, then select each limb in turn and add a keyframe for each one. I'll do that real quick. So we added a keyframe for each bone that makes up the upper and lower arm, and for each bone that makes up the upper and lower leg. Now we'll pose them. The twisting somersault will be completed in 3 stages. The first stage will consist of a 90-degree turn, the second stage a 180-degree turn, and the final stage another 90-degree turn, a 360-degree somersault in all. The limbs will be folded and bent in the first stage where the model turns 90 degrees. In the second stage, when the model completes a 180-degree turn, the limbs will essentially remain motionless. In the final stage, when the model makes the last 90-degree turn to return to its starting position, the limbs will also unfold to return to their starting position. So let's move to frame 40 and perform the poses for the first stage. Upper arm, click, press G for grab, move, turn around, that's too much, a little bit, add a keyframe, lower arm, G for grab towards the body. See what it looks like, that looks good. Add a keyframe. Scroll back and forth to see our work. There we go. We don't have to do anything fancy with the poses here. This is not really an animation tutorial, so no inverse kinematics or anything like that is involved here. Just simple poses will suffice. We are illustrating a different concept. Now for the right arm, upper arm, G for grab. That looks good. Keyframe. Lower arm, G for grab towards the center of the body. That looks good. Keyframe. Let's see what we've done. Scroll back and forth. It's looking good. And now for the legs. We'll rotate this time. So press RX to constrain the rotation to the x-axis. Just move it a little forward. That would ensure that the thigh doesn't bend towards the middle of the body. It's a little more difficult to keep the thigh from moving either towards or away from the body. That's why I'm choosing rotation for this one. That looks about right. Yup. Keyframe. Lower leg. Arrow X. Then bring it down. Keyframe. Looks good. Looks like it's a little bent out, but it should be fine. Or we could move it in a little bit. The upper thigh in a little bit, actually. Let's move it like that. Keyframe again. And we're looking good. Now for the last limb. Arrow X. Keyframe. Arrow X. Keyframe. Okay. Now let's move to frame 120. We want to make sure that this pose is maintained from frame 40 to frame 120. So just add a keyframe for each limb at frame 120. Right lower limb is already selected, so just keyframe it. Right upper limb. Oh, there we go. Then just keyframe the rest. Then we'll move the playhead to frame 160 to return the limbs to their starting positions. This is where the model will complete the last 90-degree turn in its somersault. So let's complete the poses. Right upper arm is already selected. So G for grab. See what it looks like from the front. We might experience a little bit of twisting, turning, distortion, this time while we're returning the poses back to their original position. That's okay for this application. Like I said, this is not really a posing or animation tutorial, so what we have will suffice. Add a keyframe. Lower arm. G for grab. Here we go. Move the upper arm a little closer to the body. Keyframe again. And now keyframe the lower arm. Okay, not bad. And then let me complete the poses for the rest of the limbs. Okay, let's see how we did. There we go. Comes back to a starting position. Look at it from the side. Not bad. Since this is a twisting somersault, the model will perform two distinct actions. An overall 363-degree somersault, which is the normal somersault that people generally make when they somersault. Then the twisting somersault itself. We need to add an empty and parent the model to the empty. So to add an empty, we'll go to Object Mode, click on Add, Empty, select Sphere, G, Z to move the empty up. We want to move it to the center of the model's body. That looks about right. Look at it from the side to make sure the empty is located right in the center and it looks right. To parent the model to the empty, first we select the armature and then the empty in that order. That order is critical. It must be done in that order. The model itself is already parented to the armature. So parenting the armature to the empty takes care of the model. The model essentially becomes the grandchild of the empty. If that sounds confusing to you, don't be discouraged at all. As you understand Blender more, as you become more familiar with Blender, all this will become clear. So select the armature, hold down Shift and then select the empty, press Ctrl P, and then select Object. Now the model is parented to the empty. So if we select the empty and then press G to move, you will see that the model is parented to the empty. It moves with the empty. The poses for the empty and the model are quite simple. The only difference is that the empty will complete its transforms using global transform orientation, while the model will complete its transforms using the local transform orientation. Go to frame 1. We'll keyframe the empty and the model at the same frames we keyframed the bones of the limbs. So add a keyframe. Go to frame 40. With global transform orientation selected for the empty, press RX minus 180 to rotate the model 180 degrees on the x-axis. And add a keyframe. And now we'll complete our 360-degree turn by going to frame 160. Press RX, then minus 90. And add a keyframe. A complete 360-degree turn by our model. And now we'll add the twisting action. So we'll switch to local transform orientation. Making sure we're still in object mode, and then select the armature. Make sure we're in frame 1 and add a keyframe. Go to frame 40. Don't let these keyframes you are seeing confuse you. These are the keyframes from the poses we made for the limbs earlier. We want the twisting action to occur from right to left. So we want the model to turn from its right to its left. So we'll press arrow Z and then 90 and add a keyframe. Scroll back. And it's a little hard to see because the model is also completing the other somersault, because remember, there are two different motions occurring here. But if you look closely, you will notice that the model is actually turning to its left. So now we'll go to frame 120. Press arrow Z and then 180 to rotate it 180 degrees. Add a keyframe. And then to frame 160, then arrow Z 90 to complete the final 90-degree turn of the twist, and add a keyframe. And now if you scroll back and forth, you will see that the model completes a somersault with a twist. To add a little flourish to our somersault, we could make the model jump up a bit to start the somersault. So go back to frame 1. Actually, I think we only need to go to frame 40. Click on the empty, and in the Object Properties tab here, for the Location section, uncheck or unselect only the Z keyframe. Then making sure you are in global orientation. Press GZ2 to make the model move up by 2 meters. GZ2. Now add the Z keyframe. And when the animation starts now, you will see that the model jumps up at the same time. We want it to remain at this height through frame 120 while it's performing that 180-degree turn. And then notice the value it has at frame 40, 8.144 meters. Go to frame 120 and type in this same value there, 8.144. And add a keyframe. So it will remain at the same height through the 180-degree turn in the middle. And then to complete the animation, we need to bring it back down. So there's our twisting somersault. Let me change the end frame here so it doesn't play longer than we desire. Let me just change it to 165. There we go. Let me hide the empty for a better view. And how about looking at it from a different angle? How about this view? I hope this tutorial has been helpful to you and that it has provided you an interesting insight into the concept of transform orientations. Thank you for watching, and please like, comment, and subscribe. Until we meet again, take care.